This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, back by popular demand, Daniel Greenfield, a Shillman Fellow at the David Horowitz Freedom Center and the editor/writer at the blog The Point that can be found on frontpagemag.com. Daniel Greenfield, an honor, pleasure, and privilege to have you back on the Glazov Gang.
And an honor, a pleasure, a privilege to be back.
Fantastic. Daniel, tonight, a blog that you wrote just recently, reports showing that failed war against ISIS were deleted. In other words, there are reports that the Obama administration's quote-unquote war against ISIS is not a success, to put it mildly, and the reports that wrote about this were deleted by the government, correct?
We saw something very similar in Benghazi. This is actually the second set of reports that are coming in, that intelligence was manipulated, that it was covered up, and that even the attempts to cover it up, the emails were then deleted to cover up the cover-up.
Okay, so Daniel, let's go back here so just a second. There are reports that files, data, whatever it is, are being deleted that show that the administration's war against ISIS is a failure, correct?
There were intelligence analysts that were writing reports warning that this is not going well, that the claims that we're achieving success, that the Obama administration's tactics are working, are just not true. They were encouraged again to edit it, or these reports were then suppressed. Then the actual attempts to suppress the reports, the emails that contained that, were themselves deleted to cover up the trail of the attempts to censor the reports.
Daniel, what do we make of this?
Well, again, it's something similar that we saw in Benghazi, something that's similar that we've seen throughout the Obama administration's efforts, which is that the White House and the people around Obama build a set of talking points. Everything is working fine. And anything that doesn't go with it, particularly on the military end, is deliberately censored, it's suppressed, and they try to make the reality fit their narrative, and when it doesn't, people get hurt.
Who is deleting these files?
The likely orders come out of the White House, but there are people who are actually in charge, and they're doing the dirty work.
Okay, so supposedly America is waging a war on ISIS, but the war is not really being waged and it's a failure. But to pretend that the war is a success is more important for this administration than the fact that it's not a success.
Absolutely, and you know this has troubling implications for the nuclear with Iran, because again, there's going to be pressure to maintain the narrative that what Obama is doing is working even when it isn't.
Okay, let's go back for a minute. Let's just start at the beginning here. ISIS has declared war overall on, I think almost everybody, but certainly on the West, on the Kufr, and on the United States. ISIS is at war with the United States, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, and it is in America's interest to defeat ISIS, am I correct?
It may be in America's interests. I'm not sure that it's in Obama's interests.
So this is what I want to get to. All indications point to the fact that it is not in Obama's interest, because, Daniel, if America, with all of its military might, wanted to crush ISIS and, pursued crushing ISIS, it would be pretty easy to do, would it not?
Of course, we know where their headquarters is. It hasn't been bombed, so it's not hard at all.
Okay, so the President of the United States is paying lip service to waging war on ISIS, but it is not happening, correct?
It's not. 3/4 of the actual planes, flights, don't result in actual bombs being dropped.
Why?
The official reason is collateral damage. Certainly that's the explanation that Bill Clinton, for example, gave on the day before September 11th, explaining why he didn't take out bin Laden. But the practical agenda there is the idea that Muslims are upset at the United States and they have some sort of just cause for being upset at the United States, and that if we bomb them, we're just giving them more reason to be upset at us.
So somewhere deep down, this is one interpretation anyway, is that the Obama administration is more concerned about upsetting Muslims than defeating ISIS.
Absolutely. The fulcrum of our entire counterterrorism policy is winning over Muslims, not so much defeating Muslim terrorists, certainly not defeating ISIS or the Taliban. It's all about keeping Muslims happy.
So just a second. But the narrative of the Obama administration is that ISIS is not Islam and that ISIS kills Muslims too. So how does this fit the rationale? Because if ISIS is not Islam and Muslims are also the victims of ISIS, why would Muslims become upset if we waged war on ISIS?
Their theory, or their narrative actually, is that there's a good Islam and a bad Islam. We don't call bad Islam Islam. We claim that it's not Islam. So when you hear them call something not Islam, you know that it's Islam. So when you upset a Muslim, suddenly he becomes a non-Muslim and starts engaging in Muslim terrorism, which, like the Islamic State, is extremely un-Islamic.
Oh boy. Okay, so just a second. But overall, there's a real contradiction here in the sense that the Obama administration very well knows that defeating ISIS will offend many Muslims, right?
Right.
But at the same time, it pretends that Muslims do not support ISIS and that ISIS is not Islamic.
Indeed.
So these are two contradictory positions in the administration.
They're only contradictory if you use logic and reason, which this administration doesn't exactly specialize in. But its essential idea is fundamentally that we simply deny the existence of Islamic terrorism by labeling Islamic terrorism as non-Islamic, but at the same time we blame Islamic terrorism on things that we did to offend Muslims.
Right. Daniel, the administration, the left, the media, they're always saying, oh, Muslims are also victims of ISIS, you know, and of course the meaning there supposedly, allegedly, is that ISIS is somehow not Islamic. So we've already had a show on this and discussed it, but let's go further on this now. If Muslims are the victims of ISIS and ISIS is not Islamic and giving Islam such a bad name, where are all the Muslim armies full of Arabs from the Middle East, full of Muslims from the entire world? Where are these Muslim armies fighting ISIS?
They're far too busy fighting each other, fighting other Muslims, Sunnis versus Shiites, to determine who's going to be in control of Syria. Nobody's really interested in fighting ISIS. Obama's not interested in fighting ISIS. The Iranians and the Syrians, the Turks and the Saudis are now going to fight over who is going to control Syria, the Sunnis and the Shiites, and the losers get massacred, much the way that ISIS would.
Okay, I mean, this is, you know, this is quite a situation. Spell out for us what is happening in Syria. Who's on whose side? Who? I don't think there's any good guys. What's the lesser of evils there?
I don't think there is a lesser of evils. This is pretty much what Islam is. Islam combines religion and politics to create a theocracy, and there can be no tolerance. There can be no tolerance for non-Muslims. There also can't be any tolerance for Muslims who deviate from its theocracy. So you have Sunnis and Shiites who have been killing each other since the days of Muhammad, well, after the days of Muhammad, to determine who's going to be in charge. And they can't coexist. Even Muslims can't coexist with other Muslims. So you have everybody in Syria fighting each other. You have the various Sunni militias, you have the various Shiite militias backed by Iran. You have Syria and you have Saudis and Turkey backing their own militias. You have the Kurds in the middle of it, and then you have ISIS fighting everybody because it claims that it is the caliphate and it is the real central authority of Islam.
Okay, what's the good news here?
The good news is for now they're pretty much killing each other and not us.
Okay, is Putin playing a constructive role by supposedly bombing ISIS, or this is a myth?
Nobody's bombing ISIS. We're not really bombing ISIS, but we're kind of occasionally bombing ISIS. Putin isn't bombing ISIS at all. Putin is bombing the enemies of the Syrian government, which is why he's there in the first place.
But wait a minute, but isn't ISIS the enemy of the Syrian government?
They're much more concerned about the forces backed by the Saudis and the Turks. We're also, by the way, pretending to enter Syria in order to bomb ISIS, but again, they're only going to bomb the Shiites who are in support of Assad. So everybody's pretending to bomb ISIS, but nobody really cares about ISIS. They're too busy fighting each other.
Okay, I'm a little bit more confused now than before the show, and I don't mean that you're not giving an excellent explanation. It's just such a mind-boggling thing going on in the Middle East and in the world. Before we go, let's conclude on this, Daniel, what we started with. So, the Obama administration is pursuing a phony war, and it's deleting reports that are revealing this phony war, correct?
It is indeed.
Okay, Daniel, in terms of accountability, isn't this very serious? That this is an administration that's lying to the American people, is not defending American security interests, and putting Americans at risk, is deleting. I mean, isn't this in some ways just as serious, if not more serious, than, let's say, Watergate?
There are about a dozen scandals in this administration that are more serious than Watergate. I mean, you have to count them all, from Hillary's email scandals to the fact that there are who knows how many M1 Abrams tanks that are being shown off by Shiite terrorist groups flying Hezbollah flags. So there's just an endless list of scandals, and it's part of what this administration benefits from because there's just attention fatigue. There's no one big scandal. There are a million big scandals.
And the argument could be made that even what we raised today is this is an impeachable offense.
It certainly is, because it's a cover-up, and it's a cover-up of a cover-up, and administrations have gone down for less. But again, it would depend on the media actually holding the White House accountable, which it is not going to do.
In conclusion, Daniel, if you were asked, how would you describe the Obama administration in terms of its foreign policy and protecting American interests against Islamic jihad and Islamic supremacism, how would you label and define this administration and this president?
Criminal.
Daniel Greenfield, thank you for joining the Glazov gang.
Thank you for having me on again.
Thank you. Our audience, if you like this show and appreciate what we talk about, please support the Glazov gang because we are a fan-generated program. Go to JamieGlazov.com and support the show. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Glazov Gang. We'll see you next week on The Glazov Gang. Good night.